Welcome back to RandomRodShop, folks. Well, today we're going to see if we can get the end bearing in this steering column we're trying to make for our 1957 Chevy pickup that was 1.5 tons. It was my dad's old wheat truck. And we've got it sitting on a 1996 Explorer chassis, and we have 1967 trailing arm for the rear suspension. So, in the last video, I got this steering column, made the bracket, got it mounted. Today, what I didn't get done was this bottom support bearing. And like I said, it's supposed to be in it's supposed to be in EPS today. So I think what I'm trying to do today is get everything prepared, and I can finish this video with us putting this thing back in. So I've made a bushing. So the idea, I guess, my idea is I'm going to drive this bushing into the end of this housing. Then I'm going to push the bearing in, and then I need to make a cage that screws into this kind of over the top, and that'll keep that bottom bearing trapped in there. It's a sealed bearing, double sealed roller bearing, so it should be fine. I just want to make sure it stays where it's supposed to stay. I noticed this isn't DOM tubing. This actually has the welded seam in it. So for the bushing, I went ahead and just ground a little groove. So one, that'll just kind of, it doesn't matter, right? That's just a bushing as a backstop for that bearing. So I don't need to worry about grinding it out. And two, it'll sort of kind of help keeping it centered. You would think that it would stay centered, but I didn't run a bit down inside that, so it's still just a little bit rusty and stuff. In the end, it doesn't matter. I'll throw some rust converter in there before we put this thing together and paint the inside of it just in case. But the idea is this gets driven in and forms a backstop for that bearing. The other thing I discovered when we were working on this is I'm going to have to cut this tube back. All right, so I've got it machined for the U-joint, and that needs to hang out past the end of the tube. So I need to cut this tube back probably about 1/2 inch. So let me get that done, and let me get back. Got to be careful that I don't drive this top bearing out and change my distance. Right. This shaft is a step shaft, and it bottoms out against that bearing. So that sets the distance on the thing. And when you put the steering wheel on, that keeps the shaft from falling out. The reason we have to put a bottom bearing in here at all is because this is a factory steering column, and the bottom of it, the steering shaft on this goes all the way down to the steering box, so the bottom was held by the steering box itself. I just cut that off when I pulled the cab off, so now we need a bottom bearing. Let me cut a little bit off this tube, because I'd like to get this bushing driven in there. I know the bearing is coming in. Turns out it's a metric bearing in terms of the best fit I could find. It's a 20 millimeter by 40 millimeter. It's 12 millimeters wide. So I need to cut this tube to length, and then drive this in so that I make sure I have 12 millimeters to put the bearing in once it shows up today. Hopefully it's going to show up today. All right, let me cut this tube off. I'll get right back to you. There we go. Okay, well, I got it cut off. I cut off about 3/4 of an inch. Need to see if I can kind of get that cleaned out, I'm going to throw some rust converter in there and see if I can paint the inside of that thing. And then I guess I'll shut this off and I'll get back with you when that bearing comes in. All right, folks. Well, the bearing came in. I'm happy. In the meantime, I went and cleaned everything up, and I made the bottom cage. I also discovered that the steering bell, you know, that was on the 57 steering column, the bolt holes for that are the same as the bolt holes in that Impala steering wheel. Now, these were a little smaller, so I drilled them out, but what that does, and the pilot hole in the center is the same size as the Impala steering wheel. So that gets bolted on to the bottom of the steering wheel, and that cleans it up and that closes the gap. So I'm kind of happy about that. Had to cut off some screws. So let me start assembling this and tell you what I did along the way. In case you're wondering, these are the holes that you put a puller in to get the steering wheel off. That's why these things are so short. The threaded portion of the steering wheel is 3/4 of an inch. So these are 3/8 of an inch. So that still leaves me 3/8 on the top side. I got a bird in here. That still leaves me 3/8 on the top side to get a puller in to get the steering wheel off. You know, again, best laid plans. Let me get something to tighten that up. Now, the one thing that is different is the horn hole is in a slightly different location for the 57 as it is for the Impala. But I thought what I'd do, that's it right there. That big hole right there. Right? I thought what I'd do is I just run a drill bit down through there and open that hole up when we get to the point that I'm worried about a horn. All right, so that's actually done. The top bearing, so the horn grounds against this. This is a brass, looks like brass housing, and the upper bearings inside there. Got it all greased. Horn works on the ground, and so the wire came loose and it was kind of old, so soldered a new wire on it. Let's see if we can get it fished back down in there. There we go. All right. Also, I machined up a bushing. Let me get this bottom shaft in and I'll show you what it does. So, you know, in the last video, I was saying we need to take up space, so this is always pulled forward, and that's what the spring is for. The problem is, the spring is just a little short, so basically machined up a bushing to take up the space, and that rides on top of the race of this upper bearing, which should be okay. And if I need a little more pressure, basically I'll put a shim underneath that bushing. I'm kind of happy with that. All right, so I told you the bearing that's coming in. It's a 20 millimeter OD or ID and a 40 OD, and it works okay on the tube. And I knew this when I ordered it. You know, just did the conversion on it. So that's 70. That's 787. 787. That shaft is an 812. So ended up taking basically putting the shaft in a lathe and just skimming it off until the bearing fits. Before we do that, we need to get this spacer in there, because the way this works, spacer goes in, then the bearing goes in, and that cage goes around the outside of the tube, and screws go through there, they go through the tube, and they go into that backing plate right there. So it's all held together pretty tight. So let me get the spacer in. It's not a tight fit, but it is, you know, it's pretty close. So it has to kind of go in fairly square. All right, there we go. So the holes are lined up there. Let's see if we can get the bearing in. There it is. There we go. So the bearing is right there at the edge of the tube, and it's backed by that collar we put in. And that should hold it in. These are some Torx head screws, 1024s. I cut them off. So they're really short, but I didn't want them getting in the way of the steering shaft in there. And you can see I painted everything. Doesn't look like it did any good. I guess it is clean now. Took a wire brush and, best of my ability, got inside, then dragged it with some acetone and a rag, got it cleaned out, put some rust converter inside there, and then just doused it with black paint once the rust converter was dry. I don't know that it matters, but I happen to have stainless screws, so these are stainless screws. I think that's going to work. I think the bearings are okay. The last step is to get the U-joint on this thing. Now, I went ahead and drilled a hole in this. all I have is split split roll pins. There we go. Definitely want to find a solid one, and still pondering in terms of maintaining, two forms of connection here. For right now, this will get it steering and this will work. But long term, I kind of like to figure that out. So let's see here. All right. I better wait to put those in. Well, what do you think? I think it's ready to go in, and we're going to have steering. All right, I'm going to move the camera around and get set up over there. Ugh. Feels like we're on a downhill slide now. Let me get my measurement and kind of get this same position here. The reason I'm reaching underneath there, that horn wire is awful close to where this bracket needs to go. That makes me happy. Alright, I'll move the light up under the hood, get the camera around, and I don't have the double D shaft, but I got that piece of one, so maybe we can still get it connected and we can turn the wheels. Alright, but I'll be right back. Alright, let's see if we can get this one go together. then there's a bolt that goes in here. Once I get the right D-shaft, we'll get this all bolted together, and this will get tightened up. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to get a couple floor jacks and see how this turns. I guess we don't really need floor jacks. Let's go turn the steering wheel. I don't know about you, but that was sweet. That turns nice. Well, it's kind of hard to beat that. And I think it looks clean. Well, I think that looks factory, guys. I don't know about you, but I think that turned out slick. And I don't think I'm going to have any trouble getting the pedal under there. We'll see, but this is going to be an automatic car. So all we got to worry about is one pedal. And I think there's plenty of room for the brake booster up front. All right, before we take it away here, you know, when I was working on the, let's see, what was it? I don't know, 2 or 3 videos ago, I don't know. Talking about the shock mounts. You know, I moved this factory shock mount to the front up there, and thought, okay, well, I can use the Explorer shocks factory mount, and quite honestly, a little bit of modifying on the lower shock mounts, which are the 67 shock mounts, and I think it'll work. And then one of you guys mentioned that, you know, why don't you just run them out the back? And so I've moved it out the back, got the sway bar with moving that bracket to the back. That's actually the bracket the sway bar sets on. So in terms of hooking up the sway bar, hooking up the shocks, that's pretty simple. Actually, if that's the only focus, that's the way to do that. The more I have looked at it, and the reason I haven't messed with it in 3 or 4 videos or whatever it's been, is every time I walk by it, I look at it a little more. And I keep thinking, what's that going to do for me in terms of putting a tank back here? Because where the tank was on the Explorer is kind of taken up with those trailing arms right now. So that's really not an option. I don't have near as much issue as a lot of people just leaving the tank in the cab, but that cab's pretty small, and I just assume get the tank out of there. So the tank needs to go back here somewhere, and it appears this is where the tank needs to go. So I think, or what I'm thinking anyway, is I need to get a bed set on here so I can see, you know, how far we got. Those normal, those short beds are, I think, 6 foot on the old one. And that is right there. Give or take. So the end of the bed is going to be right here. And that means I'm going to have to extend the frame rails. That's not a big deal. I don't know. I need to look at some tanks. That looks like because the shocks come up here and they go down that way. Probably want to keep the tank behind that. So if I do that, that gives me about 19 inches, give or take. And I've got the width. I mean, this is actually pretty wide back here. So There's a good 35 inches back there, so that's actually wider than the old pickups. So I got about a 19 by 32, what did I say, 34? 19 by 34 space. 34, 35, 35. 19 by 35 space. So I just need to see what kind of tanks we got. I prefer, you know, not spend the money to buy a fuel cell or anything like that. It'd be nice to find a tank that would actually fit it, but that one I don't know. That's kind of a long, narrow tank. Anyway, if you got any ideas, I would greatly appreciate it. The other piece that I still don't know about, which is another reason why I need to set the bed on here, is I still don't know if that height right there is going to cause me a problem. Something tells me I need that below the frame rail. I think I said that in one of the other videos, and I can't come up with a different assumption. Is that probably is going to have to go down. And if we do that, basically, might as well just put a piece of rectangular tubing across there and call it done. I don't know. If you got any comments, let me know. Anyway, I'm really happy about the way this turned out. This is probably going to turn out to be a pretty short video for you guys, but I've been after it all day. So, if you found something interesting, you know, leave a like, make a comment. And if you enjoy what we're doing, you know, go ahead and subscribe. Until next time, I'm Random at RandomRodShop, and I'm out of here.